For 95% of people in the world, this is the absolute best laptop that you can buy when it comes to bang for your buck in 2024. Now, this wasn't always the case. If you asked me back in 2019 when Apple was still using Intel chips, I literally never recommended a MacBook Air to anyone, ever. But Apple Silicon has changed everything, and now the M2 MacBook Air is likely the best laptop for most people. Heck, when I travel, this is the laptop I take with me because I retain most of the power from my M2 Pro MacBook Pro in a lighter form factor. So why am I making this video when the M2 MacBook Air has been out there for a while now, and Apple has their M3 MacBook Pros also out in the wild? Well, I get asked all the time, what laptop should I get if I'm on a budget? Most people who ask me are looking to do basic video and photo editing, and lately I've been recommending the M2 MacBook Air to everyone. Let's start with the exterior. This is the 15-inch version, but you can also get the smaller 13-inch version if you're looking to save on weight, size, and money. This is the Midnight Blue edition, and I love the color personally. I think it's a nice change from the usual silver that I usually spring for. This has 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of memory. The only thing I don't like about the exterior of this laptop are the ports. It only has 2 USB-C ports and no memory card reader like the MacBook Pro does. Luckily, since I use this as my travel laptop, I generally only need one port to plug in my SSDs. Luckily, it has also retained the fingerprint reader, and if you haven't used one of Apple's Touch ID laptops before, this is an absolute game changer for unlocking your device and also paying for things when online shopping. I was never a fan of the touch bar, so this is an incredibly welcome change for me. When we actually dive into the laptop, the screen gets incredibly bright and looks gorgeous. It's an absolute pleasure to edit on this screen or to just consume media. But the thing that we're all here for is the performance. There's no point in having a light laptop with a nice screen if you can't actually do anything on it. So let's start with something I like to call the app test. And that's when I open every single app in my dock at once to see if the laptop can handle it. This is a test I started doing since the M chips have come out because they're so dang capable. As you can see from this test, the M2 MacBook Air has absolutely no issues opening every single app in the dock, and it does it quickly. Apps like DaVinci and Photoshop open up and run without lag, which is just simply incredible and says a lot about the power under the hood in this laptop. Now, what about photo editing? Here I have the latest version of Photoshop loaded and about 10 raw photos from a Canon R5 and Canon R5C. I'm going to open up all 10 at once using Photoshop and see what happens. Immediately, you'll notice that the camera raw opens up for all of the photos at once, and I'm able to make adjustments to the photos, and the latency is virtually non-existent. Also, if I try to open up all the photos at once into Photoshop, it does it rather quickly. This is real time and not sped up, and of course, this is not a scientific method of testing computer speed or anything, but these are massive raw 45 megapixel photos, so I'm pretty impressed with the speed. Now, the whole time during this test, I have not heard the fan spin up even once, which is just awesome. Previous MacBook Airs used to get incredibly hot. Now you don't even notice any change in temperature or fan noise. Finally, this is the most important test for me on performance, and that's video editing. I shoot everything on my Canon R5C, which records oversampled 8K footage down to 4K. Needless to say, the files are stupid large, even in the XF AVC codec on the R5C. Now, the biggest reason I sold my Intel MacBook Pro and purchased the M2 Pro MacBook Pro was because I was tired of making proxies and waiting for things to render. The M2 MacBook Pro doesn't need any proxies, and I can drop the oversampled 8K footage directly into my timeline when editing in DaVinci, and I don't have to wait for it to render. It's immediately available. So for me, this was the biggest quality of life difference and why I upgraded. So let's see if the MacBook Air can perform similarly. So here I have 5 8K oversampled clips on my SSD. If I take those and I directly drop them into my timeline in DaVinci Resolve, you'll notice that the MacBook Air is able to process the videos rather quickly, and I'm able to scroll through my timeline rather quickly as well, which is just incredible for a MacBook Air. And that's literally everything that I wanted to share on this M2 MacBook Air. Now, this is not the longest video in the world, and that's because there are a ton of videos out there talking about the hardware, the software, the specs, the design theory behind the M2 MacBook Air. But to me, those are not the things that are important. For me, the most important thing is always going to be performance. Can the laptop that I'm using on a day-to-day basis keep up with the tasks that I want to do? And that was the whole point that I wanted to try and get across with this video, that the M2 MacBook Air and any of the M-chip MacBook Airs, really, even if you're looking at the M1 chip, are more than capable now. With Apple's silicon chip, literally everything has changed when it comes to these laptops. Like I said at the beginning of this video, in the past, I never would have ever purchased a MacBook Air. Now, Apple did send me this laptop to try out, and I gotta say, it's completely changed my mind on the MacBook Air series, and it's literally the laptop that I recommend to almost every single person that asks me which laptop should they buy. Because let's face it, I'm using a M2 Pro MacBook Pro, and I'm nowhere near maxing that thing out. Even when editing in DaVinci and in Photoshop, working with extremely large files on the highest end prosumer or consumer cameras, like I mentioned, I'm using the Canon R5C, and literally dropping in oversampled 8K footage and 45 megapixels running in Photoshop and in DaVinci without proxies on an Air series is just absolutely incredible to me. So if you're worried about performance, I definitely wouldn't be. This is a laptop that I think would work for almost anyone on a daily scenario, especially if you're traveling. I think the lighter form factor of the MacBook Air is 100% worth it. So hopefully, if you were on the fence about purchasing a new MacBook and you were looking at the M-chip MacBook Airs and you were wondering to yourself, I haven't heard the best thing about MacBook Airs and everyone just gets a Pro. Trust me, that's a thing of the past, and this is almost the perfect laptop now, again, especially if you're traveling or if you're on the go. So hopefully this video helped make your decision a little bit easier, but that's it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, keep creating.